So welcome everybody. Welcome also that good that you are here for this panel. It's an initiative from the Labor Berlin in the context of the SPECTRAL workshop on archiving and reenacting expanded cinema projects. I suggest we do a very brief introduction, each of us, and then I ask Anja and Juan to tell something about the SPECTRAL project, and from there we pick it up. Maybe we start with Anja to introduce yourself. Is there a microphone?
No. Yeah, so my name is Anja Dornieden. I work with Juan as an artistic duo under the name Ojo Boca. We work mostly on 16mm film, and we do performances and we make films together, and we're also part of the collective Labor Berlin.
Hi, I'm Federico Windhausen. I write about and curate film, specifically experimental film, and I'm based in Buenos Aires.
I'm Claudio Caldini, I'm filmmaker and musician, and came from Buenos Aires also.
Hi, I'm Esperanza, and I'm an artist and research. I do research on expanded cinema, and I come from Spain.
Hello, I'm Juan González Monroy, and as Anja said, I work together with Anja as duo Ojo Boca, and I'm also part of Labor Berlin. And yeah.
And I'm Meyer. I'm a curator from the Eye Film Museum in Amsterdam, where we also work, of course, with expanded cinema projects. Well, I'd like to invite Juan and Anja then to talk about the SPECTRAL project, where this whole event and the evening of yesterday was part of.
Yeah, so maybe briefly, I mean, SPECTRAL is a collaboration of 6 artist-run film labs across Europe, and we applied for a European cultural grant together, a cooperation project, and the idea was to promote and also give more resources to this whole field of expanded cinema. And it was kind of interesting because when we started the application, it's also, and we were like, oh, how do we relay this expanded cinema to the European Union? Like, how do you describe this kind of like this practice? And also we initially did like a lot of surveys, and like often like the infrastructures around it, it's so difficult to do this work. And with the SPECTRAL, we just wanted to give it more resources, more production. So there's a lot of residencies also. But also we partnered with some festivals to have events, and we will also later in the project do touring workshops or touring series. And with EMAF we had this idea of doing historical performances, and so yeah, it's kind of a pity that last night we didn't get to do it, even though we set out to, yeah. But yeah, I don't know what else to say. Do you want to add something about SPECTRAL? Juan?
I guess about this project itself, the Unburdened Recollections, the idea was, like Anja said, we have different aspects of the project, and Labor Berlin, one aspect of it is the idea of the archive for live cinema, expanded cinema, time-based events, installations where usually they happen once and then it's very hard to know to reproduce it or recreate it. It's not something like a cinema, like a film, single screen, you just play it. And we were interested in the idea of how can you bring works like that back to life in different ways. So we discussed this with Catherine and with EMAF and thought it could be a good space to not only try to create works like, or bring back works like this, but also to discuss these sort of practices of how do you go about it, how does it work, and case by case, because each case is so different depending on the work and the conditions. How can you do things like this? So we set out to do 2 works in different editions of the festival. And in this case, we ended up with 2 very different situations. One case was an artist that isn't living anymore, that the work had to be very interpreted in order to create it. And then another case where the artist himself is presenting a sort of his own historical work.
I immediately have a question then, because how do you consider the idea of archive? Is that a physical thing, or how do you define archive in this context?
I mean, the first thing that we thought about was more of like this kind of living archive. So it was more the idea of, if you're able to present a work again, it will live in the people that get to see it again. So of course we had within the project ideas of how to document things, but I mean, these are like traditional archiving practices. Of course, you have then written whatever's written, if there's some sort of video documentation, and I mean, this kind of thing is interesting in terms of a workflow, but we were thinking more, okay, but if you have that, and if you do that in a certain way, can you actually show the work again and have it live? Because the thing about this type of work is that you're supposed to actually experience it, or else it's kind of, for us at least who do it, it makes little sense to just say, I watched some video or I read a document. This can be interesting, of course, but yeah.
Maybe we can ask Esmeralda now to introduce the project that we were so unlucky not to see yesterday evening. And but you can you tell a little bit about the research that you did, about what you tried to achieve yesterday evening, and well, to introduce the work as such.
Yeah, sorry, maybe it's helped me to expand this. Okay, thank you, Catherine. Yeah, I brought some images to also to help people, and also because the project is quite complex. Starting with Valdelomar, this figure of the who was like a Spanish creator, sort of engineer, poet, filmmaker, who was very unknown because he made all his work. He lived in the years of a dictatorship in Spain, of Franco's Spain, and the work we tried to present last night was one of his inventions is the desbordamiento panorámico de la imagen, which was like an expanded cinema project really early for its age. It's a project of 1957. These are some drawings from Valdelomar, where he explains that he was trying to make a project where the image would be overflowing. So that's the desbordamiento panorámico de la imagen means a panoramic overflowing of the image. His idea was to overflow or somehow reach the extrafoveal area of the retina with images. This means the area beyond the central retina of the eye. He wanted to enrich this with images, but also with other senses, as we found later. In his writings, because this project was only shown 2 times, in his writings he describes the challenges that the cinema was experiencing at the time of the 1950s, because the television was already keeping the audiences at home too much, and he was trying to to create a cinematic experience where, in order to awaken people, in order to take people to the venues, to the cinema theater, and bring them out of their homes. So the way he wanted to do this was with this like a multisensorial experience, where he actually describes, let me find because there is, the only writing about this is from a lecture he gave in Turin, Italy, about the project. And he talks about, sorry, the writing is very small, but actually I have also a translation here. Here. So the experience to bring people out of their homes would be to create this kind of cinema where there would be synchronized, pulsating lighting systems in the project, in the venue, an inducing perfume, a particular flavor to each film, particular pulsating effects like flickering effects, the diaphonic sound, which is a kind of invention he also made. It was like his counterpart to the stereophony system, and also the panoramic overflowing of the image. So the whole experience would be multisensorial, as you see, and the panoramic overflowing of the image would be part of it. So in the experience we were trying to present last night, actually I think it was going to be very special, because we also managed to combine not only the overflowing of the image, which means there is a concentric image, one central image, which would be the 35mm projection with a figurative image. In this case, it was Fuego en Castilla, Fire in Castile, one of Valdelomar's films. And this screening would be overflown by this other more abstract image. But this image would be happening at times only, not continually. And the particularity of the event we tried to present is that for the first time it was going to be shown together with other sensorial treatments, like the little drink we serve, the smell, and other things we had prepared. This is the way I had seen Desbordamiento Panorámico before, which was like an installation, but then it was discovered, maybe we can talk about it later, I don't know if that the piece was actually a performance. The way Valdelomar conceived it was more like a performance.
Can you briefly tell what kind of other apparatuses were there yesterday, except for the film projector?
Yeah.
There were the slide projection, there were the lanterns.
Exactly. We also had this kind of, also it's like a reenactment of the, maybe Juan and Anja can also talk about this. Is the Optica Bionica, the bionic optic, which was also something that Valdelomar used in his projects. Do you want to talk about it, Juan, maybe?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So when Esperanza, we talked to her about. So basically, in the project, Labor Berlin, we initiated the idea of trying to find these cases to talk about and try, and we approached then a researcher or an artist that had some experience with some of these historical works, and to say, is it possible to make something? So, and that's why we have Esperanza and Federico. And Esperanza, she proposed this work to us. She explained it to us. And so then she said, yeah, should we collaborate to try to make it happen with Anja and me? So then we started to research with the help of Esperanza how this work might have been done. Like she said, it was shown twice in Cannes and in Germany, I think. But there's no photographs, no film documentation, and not even much text left of what it looked like. So it was kind of having to base ourselves on his text and some of what his nephew, who's still alive, who had seen it once, but he's quite old, so it's a bit hard to know what exactly he meant. So we went to look at Valdelomar's work, and in this case, this is it's called a bionic optic. It was also work he did with slides and an anamorphic lens that is put on a rotating motorized system. So the anamorphic lens rotates and transforms the image. When we heard about this project, the thing was that we knew that there was a 35, but we didn't know exactly how this overflowing was done. So Valdelomar had an idea in his paper to talk about that you would actually print the overflowing onto the same 35 millimeter film as you show, so it would all be in one reel, on one strip, and with some prisms it would get, so very complex, but this doesn't exist, and there's no projector that we know that could do this, so we knew we had to create the sort of expanded field with other medium. And then we came to the thing that because Valdelomar did work a lot with slides, it was a format that he really researched, that he was very interested in, then we could do this overflowing with slides and trying to recreate, for example, he also used shutters, and because with shutters we can have flicker, which is very important to him. So we could try to create, you can see there some, this is the distorted fire from the anamorphic, and then try to use elements from the film itself, because the film is called Fire in Castile, and what we got from like the nephew, for example, and from some small text that is left over from audience that was seeing the film either in Cannes or Germany. They said that there was like, it looked as if there was fire hitting the audience or floating in front of the audience, and that they were like freaked out by it or something. So that's how we ended up with this idea of using slide projectors with very wide lenses to create this much larger image around it.
And the slides were preserved; those were still there.
No. The slides we had to create ourselves. So because he talked about this idea that the overflowing image, like Esperanza said, should be. It's not supposed to be. Yeah, it's abstract. It's supposed to be kind of like what happens in the corner of your eyes. But because we had this element of fire and we knew about this idea of the audience reacting to the fire in this performance, that, like for example, there in Cannes, where he showed it. So we focused on that and used like smoke, fire, and then the patterns, because in his film there's a lot of, I mean, at least thankfully we got to show the film. If you see it, he always superimposes patterns, abstract patterns onto the statues. So we worked with versions of those patterns. But yeah, we made the slides ourselves.
Maybe to switch for a moment to Claudio. In your case, you work with your own materials and you know exactly what you're doing, and you try to achieve a result that you have in your mind. As I understand, yesterday the films that you used were made in the 70s already, or not? Or were they also made recently? Because your work that you showed yesterday is a work from, let's say, 10 years ago, or not?
Yes, it is. This piece about fantasmas cromáticos, tal vez voy a hablar en español y tú me traduces, ¿sí? Okay. Mi trabajo surge no de un concepto previo, sino de impresiones sensoriales, aunque esta pieza y también las dos piezas surgen del trabajo de mi taller, donde yo enseñaba cine expandido y cine en Super 8 a un grupo de artistas interesados. Y a partir de el trabajo en equipo, propongo alguna tarea, por ejemplo, ir a hacer una jornada de filmación en exteriores.
Okay, Claudio said that he doesn't work with, and you correct me, Claudio, if I forget something, that he doesn't work with a prior concept. He works with sensorial impressions. The work emerges out of sensorial impressions. More sort of concretely, he had been offering a workshop in Buenos Aires on expanded cinema to interested young filmmakers and artists. And one of the activities was to work in a group as a team and kind of spend a night in a rural location usually, right?
Yes, I will take it.
Yeah, okay.
Entonces propuse que fuéramos a una jornada de cierre del workshop en una reserva natural, un parque nacional donde hay un mirador donde se ve el horizonte a la distancia sobre la orilla del río Paraná. Allí dejé de observar lo que hacían los estudiantes y dejé que cada uno hiciera lo suyo y yo mismo me dediqué a mi propia búsqueda. Y así fue como surgieron las primeras tomas de este trabajo y luego volví yo mismo solo al lugar y hice las tomas necesarias para complementar la primera aproximación y terminar las tomas para la proyección expandida. Y quisiera mostrarles entonces un par de los Super 8s, los reels originales de Super 8, fragmentos donde se ve el aspecto del sitio y además las primeras pruebas y primeras tomas que yo hice, esta vez en formato monocanal. I don't know where them are.
¿Cómo es el nombre?
Horizontal HRZNT, origen. Please.
Okay. Ese no.
¿Tú puedes hablar mientras?
Sí. No, ese no.
No, one more underneath it, Esperanza. Claudio, it says Claudio.
Dice Claudio la carpeta.
This one.
Okay, sorry, while they're doing this, Claudio was saying that for the sort of final activity of the workshop, they went to the edge of the Rio Paraná, to a particular site that he had chosen, in part for where the horizon line would be from the vantage point. Okay. Perdí algo de la descripción del lugar. Río Paraná.
Va a estar dentro del video que vamos a ver.
Okay, doesn't matter. You'll see it in the video he's going to show.
Un reel de Super 8.
Okay.
Pero quisiera decir algo ya que apareció la imagen sobre por qué hay esta imagen y la siguiente.
Okay.
Porque cuando Juan me propuso que explicara la forma en que la performance, los materiales para la performance fueron hechos, yo dibujé a posteriori estos dos diagramas, uno que es las posiciones de la cámara en el sitio, en el mirador, y el otro, podés pasar a la siguiente, es un plan de los disparos de la animación experimental que hice sobre la cámara colocada sobre el trípode. Entonces ahí vemos el orden lineal arriba y el orden alternado debajo, y entonces cómo el orden se alterna en la secuencia de disparos cuadro a cuadro.
All right, so I'm going to combine the two. Okay.
Esto fue hecho después.
Sí.
Las películas fueron hechas sin plan.
Sí. To finish what he said earlier, each person in the seminar and in the workshop did their own thing in that location, and he likewise also went on a kind of search for what might interest him in that space, in that site, and that's where the first shots emerged for Horizonte. And later he shot more to complete the work, to finish it for projection. He wants to show, so later he'll show some original reels, so you'll see fragments and you'll see the aspects of the site. But these images, starting with the second one, and I'll go backwards, is there's ¿todo bien? The first one is shows the position of the camera in the lookout location, and the second diagram shows is a plan of the second diagram shows the camera on the tripod, the plan for the camera on the tripod. Above there's a linear order, and below there's the order of alternation for the tripod for its movement. ¿Qué pasa?
No, pensé que el video estaba aquí en la carpeta, pero no. Bueno, pasemos a la segunda performance. También en mi workshop yo suelo hacer un ejercicio que es esta fotografía que ustedes ven para ejercitar la práctica de la síntesis aditiva de color.
Eso otra vez está escribiendo, ¿verdad?
En esta fotografía vemos una práctica de síntesis aditiva de color que yo hago con los proyectores en vacío, sin película, con filtros fotográficos de color. Entonces, podemos comprender los principios de la síntesis aditiva.
And this is an exercise in his workshop that has to do with additive synthesis of color, in which he places filters in front of the projectors, and the students are, I remember this, I saw this once, students are encouraged to experiment with the color combinations.
Each one of the students managing one of the projectors and the filters and changing them and making a spontaneous composition.
One yellow, one cyan, one magenta.
Green and violet and everything, and blue.
No, but the three projectors have
Yes, the three projectors was RGB, red, green, and blue. Next one. One of the students was a painter, and she asked me what happens with the photographs made by Sergei Prokudin-Gorsky in 1910 or so, in the beginning of the 20th century. And she asked me, how can we reproduce this primitive color system? And then I said, okay, let's do it. I myself never had intended, but we tried, and we succeed. Now we see, this is the flyer for the final show of the year of my workshop and the result of the exercise. In that exercise, I saw that the wheels of the bicycles, all what is still, the color was reproduced exactly as we wanted, but the moving one, the colors were changing. And then I said, what can I do with this? Let's try something else. The process is to put, to reproduce the original system by procoding, is to have three exposures, three different exposures of the subject, one with each color, the red, the green, and the blue. And to reproduce the approximative real color, you have to project each one of them with the same color the shot was taken. But I tried and experimented that if you don't make the shots, the takes with the filters and show it with filters, all that is still will remains in black and white, and all that it moves will act like color separation. That is the effect that you saw yesterday in my performance. No, that work was a working process for 2 or 3 years. And I experimented many things and additions, and finally I have the first public screening in the Fundación Telefónica in Buenos Aires with the help of an electronic musician. And I used 3 projectors with RGB filters and 2 additional projectors with another images in black and white. And the next one, in that case, the place was very big, and we had projected the film on a small screen and had a digital camera there catching the main image, as you can see, and emitiéndola en 3 proyectores de vídeo en una gran pared. Así.
Projecting it on 3 video projectors on a larger wall.
Yeah, like that. Of course, the video reproduction was not as faithful in the color as the original one. So the people prefer to look the original screening with the super projectors. Can we see the next one? No, there is no more. Okay, that's all.
How important for you is it then to work with Super 8 film?
How
important, how crucial is it for you to work with the Super 8 film material?
Well, I started with Super 8 material when I was very, very young. And this kind of formal experiments from my early years as a filmmaker in the 70s was always done in Super 8, because in Buenos Aires 16 millimeters was very, very expensive, and the laboratories for process the film didn't pay us many attention, so we cannot ask them really nothing, because they were working for advertising or professional television or so, and then experimental film had nothing to do for them. So I remained with Super 8 since then, and then the tool became a part of my daily life, and until today.
Federico, may I ask you to reflect on, because we just heard the maker and he explained how he made his work, but how can we archive this? How can we document this work? How can we show this in 20 years' time when the maker is not there anymore?
Yeah, with regard to this work in particular, last night was probably the best easily the best documentation of this work that we'll probably ever have, I think. So there was a camera on the screen, there was a camera on Claudio to show what he was doing, and there was a camera showing the room, right? Those were the three. And the Labor Berlin camera people were there for the rehearsal in order to prepare, to also see how the camera, the settings, what the setting should be for the camera for the, to show those images which are, which have a particular quality. Let's talk about the first work. Horizonte has, is very much reliant on a combination of effects. One, it's a pan, 3 pans, which is typically a movement we see as something very smooth in commercial cinema. Claudio has done it as a stop motion pan, right? A lateral movement, and then it's stop motion and it's a loop, and so it appears in the film with more kind of more flicker, and the intermittency effect of the shutter is heightened, right? Which is something we see with our eye when we're sitting in the cinema. Now, can the video camera capture that? I don't know, I haven't seen the video. Would it have to go through some post-processing, post-production?
What was the projection speed?
What was the projection speed can vary. The recording, the projection speed was, sorry, oh, you mean the analog?
Still, it is 24 frames.
24. Fantasma Chromática, the second work is 18. 18. So then,
so you will see an interference on the video probably then. It will not be an exact representation then of what you saw, what we saw.
Unless you put a filter on it, and you can maybe a filter can reduce some of that, right? So then will there be added filter? Will there be some smoothing, unintended smoothing the video creates so that it wouldn't be as sharp, the intermittency effect, right? And it's important for the work and for our experience of the work, because if you think about it, there were 3 loops, and so there's conceptually the continuousness of a loop on each, going through every projector, but then the single unit of the frame is emphasized with the intermittency effect and the stop motion. So there's a play of kind of the continuity of the loop with the individuality of the frame in your work.
And each time the loops combine in different ways. So you will never see the same composed 3 images.
Right, and the repetition and difference is like this kind of is fascinating also in terms of the work, because there's no gestalt with this work also, right? So then also, how do you compare? How do you're going with your memory of the work when you're watching the video and you're deciding whether it's adequate, the image is adequate to the original experience. Okay, that's one aspect of it. But we could just talk forever about the image. It's expanded cinema, right? So people were turning around and looking, people were aware of the presence of and listening to the presence of the projector. So then for that reason, there were the other 2 cameras. How does that become represented and archived? And also, who is the archive for? Is the archive for a reproduction of the experience or just simply for study?
Also, this work can be an installation without me live performing because of the system. There are 3 loops and the projectors can be there alone. And the performance allows me to make the live sound.
Yeah, and I think one question, and maybe then Federico, you can tell us or both explain a bit when we talked about Horizonte for this project, because I would ask you, Claudio, like you have a sort of score that is there for how to shoot it. Is it possible also, if loops exist, for another person to perform it?
Well, to perform or to make the film in the same place. For that, I wanted to show the video, but we don't have it. The place, you can see it in the internet, in the Google Earth, and you can find the place. It is called Reserva Natural Otamendi, Parque Nacional Ciervo de los Pantanos, al norte de la ciudad de Buenos Aires, 60 kilometers north of Buenos Aires. So, if one goes there with a Super 8 camera and
Follows your
an
score.
idea of what I have done, you can reproduce it almost exactly.
Yeah, and as I guess Federico, when he told us about this project, as I remember, in a way, you reproduced your own work too, because you
Yes, I
so
forgot
this
to
was-
explain that, because I made that first version in summer, and I came back also and made another version in winter with a very different light impression.
Maybe a question to Esperanza. If there had been an written out choreography of all the effects and would that have helped you in recreating the work?
Yeah, enormously, of course. As Juan mentioned before, we only had this lecture of Valdelomar, which thankfully it was transcribed. His writings are actually something out of the ordinary. Valdelomar's writings, I think, for me, for any researcher going into his work, Valdelomar's work is not just about the films he made, but also the writings are quite amazing. But there is this account, but then also the conversations I had with Gonzalo Sáenz de Buruaga, who was his assistant by then, and as Juan mentioned, now he is over 80. He became also his son-in-law, and he has a good memory. I mean, he could remember, and he told me everything he could. But the thing is, when he was helping Valdelomar with the presentations of Desbordamiento, Valdelomar would ask him to go somewhere else to get something. So he was not there 100% of the time, and he would see Valdelomar maybe take something out of his pocket. He was not sure of the technical aspects of Desbordamiento, so he was not sure if there was like a second expanded image screen from the back. He saw Valdelomar maybe masking the image somehow, taking things out of his pocket and doing something more performative, intervening on the beam of light somehow. But then we tried to find if there was in the Spanish film archive, in the National Film Archive, we were trying to find if there was something Valdelomar maybe had, because apparently there are many film reels there that haven't been inspected properly yet, but they couldn't find anything. So we had to use our imagination to some degree, and then put together as precisely as we could all the bits and pieces of information we could find.
And maybe now you have seen Claudio's work. What would you need in 20 years' time to recreate that work?
Claudio, yeah.
No, it's a question for you.
Sorry.
What if now you have seen his work, and in the case you want to recreate that in 20 years' time?
The problem is I couldn't see it
Oh,
last
you didn't
night
see it.
because
Oh,
we
sorry.
were.
Okay.
Yeah, but
You can.
But basically, yeah, I think that's the idea, of course, how we were thinking of documentation. It's not just of like, oh, you want to see the work, watch this video. In a sense, for example, if the artist says, if Claudio says, here's the score, this is how it works, and here's a video, you could see it perform once, then and we know what are the materials, and they still exist in production. So actually, from the materials we gathered and Claudio's thing, we could very easily redo it. It would, of course, always be different. There would be something else. It's not the same artist. It's not the same. But this case is interesting because we could even remake it from traveling to Argentina and reshooting it and restaging it from scratch. So, yeah, that's an interesting case of where you could have a complete score, kind of.
Federico, can you elaborate a little bit on the position of Claudio's work in expanded cinema? Let's say, because a lot of what we consider as expanded cinema is more artist cinema since the 1990s. Well, this is again a work that goes back more to the cinematographic tradition, I would say. Can you say a little bit, what Claudio's position is in the tradition of expanded cinema?
Yeah. My understanding of expanded cinema is that, well, it encompasses many decades, but the term, as I the term comes from at least the late 60s, mid to late 60s, and the part of that tradition that I see Claudio kind of in dialogue with is actually circles around 1973 for me. Works like particular works, the kind of works you would have seen coming out of the London Filmmakers Co-op in the early 70s. I'm thinking of Horizonte in particular, and also the way I think of this work is in dialogue with particular moments in expanded cinema, but also experimental cinema in different parts of the world. I think the dialogue that they were, in terms of the dialogues, the more proximate conversations that Claudio was having through his work happened maybe in the 1970s, and then after his kind of renewal of his engagement with cinema after the 2000. But in terms of what I see as a historian, the way in which you could create works that would have instructions and someone else could carry them out, that's something that you see in the London Filmmakers Co-op. And in fact, some of the techniques, like the threading of one strip of film through 3 projectors, is something that reminded me of, I have a clip, and I don't think we need it, but of William Raeben's work Diagonal, where he did the same thing, but to very different effect and a very different kind of work. Horizonte also reminds me in some ways of the Emigold's film, Schenectady, in terms of its exploration of stop motion depiction of a landscape with a horizon at a particular point. But then I'm talking about the past, and these are works that were made in the past 15 years, and I'm talking about the 70s. To me as a historian, one thing that's interesting about Claudio's work is that he is, in some ways, he's making work that's very much the result of his workshops and how he thinks now and his thinking, his relationship to the cinema now. But it's also, and maybe Claudio can agree or disagree with this, work that he might have realized had he had the resources in the 70s, that there is an extension, there's a continuity with what you used to do.
Yes, because many of the techniques of triple projection I was using before to make single screen films. I had a translucid screen and three converging projectors on them, and to make a new film from the other side with a camera. So at one moment I say, well, we'll do the same in the projection room. And that's what was the origin of the expanded pieces in the 70s. but I could not do it until 1990 or 91.
And then you didn't show it for at least a decade.
No, then in the 90s, Super 8 was no more available in Buenos Aires for 10 years, and I started to make analog video and started another kind of work. Nowadays I'm working also with digital, but remains the Super 8 always.
Shall we have a look at your clips, Federico, and then
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
No?
No, the conversation's enough.
Okay.
I think. And just to say about this region, by the way, of Germany, I think one of the things that brought you out of back into the world of cinema was that you were invited to Oberhausen to present. Did you present your films and you were programming?
I was member of the jury in 2003.
So it was partly thanks to that you started to return to the world of film.
Traducime todo lo que dijiste porque no entendí bien.
Gracias en parte a eso volviste al mundo del cine.
Sí.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Maybe this is a moment for Anja to answer a question about the choice of the non-German makers. Did you consider to choose German expanded cinema?
I mean, well, yeah, I mean, we didn't not, it was not a choice to not use a German. I think it was just we were reaching out to friends and people we knew who we had met. I mean, because Juan and I, we also do expanded cinema, and so we do travel, and we had met, and we knew that, for example, Esperanza had done a research trip to Taiwan. She had told us that she was researching, and our initial idea about talking to Esperanza was like, oh, so what did you discover in Taiwan? Like, what came out of your research? She was researching about expanded cinema there, and then she was like, yeah, there's very little, and but I also work on this Val d'Oma, and so then she proposed. So it was also like just speaking to friends or curators we knew, and yeah, and just also in terms of timing, yeah, we also had other, like, I mean, it's these works, it requires so much, just like the infrastructure and also then the equipment that yeah, we, for this edition, we decided to yeah, also with Federico, he was like proposed us also initially like these programs that happened in, you said in Buenos Aires, there were like these screenings, and they were, but they were only fragments. They were like none of the films were still available, and it sounded very intriguing, but we also had very limited resources, and we were like, oh, so we also had to kind of be, okay, what can we manage, what resources do we have, and what time? So then you proposed us a second, like we had a follow-up meeting, and you were like, oh, what about the performances by Claudio? And so, yeah.
The first idea was that I had found a document from the Ditela Institute, which was this avant-garde center in Buenos Aires, where someone who had, I forget his name now, alguien que trabajó en el Ditela, someone who had participated in the Ditela events which had a lot of happenings at the time. He extracted all of the moving image related elements of the happenings and reproduced them for his students in a workshop, the kind of workshop that Claudio used to do with his film students. And so there was this document where had all the specifications for how you could do these moving image experiments, which had been part of happenings and theater pieces in the Ditela Institute. And yes, it wouldn't have been easy. Yeah, and that was I threw out the first most difficult possibility, and then very happily we moved on to the more viable one. And I don't know, maybe someday. It's almost more like something that would be interesting. I guess there's also different approaches to reconstruction. One is maybe the historian, archivist try to be as faithful as possible. Maybe this lends itself more to commissioning a group of artists to do more creative reinterpretations of those works.
Yeah, and I also wanted to say to Anja that there are a lot of works in the sort of canon that are available that have been sort of documented and are reproducible. And of course, we didn't have a lot of interest in going back to those. Like, I don't know, you can see light describing a cone gets restaged every year or something like this kind of work that, and it's usually work that comes from Europe or especially North America. So I think when we were searching for projects, we were trying like purposefully to avoid all that stuff. Like, okay, those people have representation. Let's find stuff that, so that's why, for example, we thought, what can we find in South America? What can we find in Asia? Another project we're working on for a future edition is a Japanese project. So just trying to find these things that for some, these other traditions and see, okay, how can we try to also make that more visible in a way, yeah.
Maybe going back to the spectral task that you have imposed yourself in, as I understand it, creating a methodology for documenting these kind of expanded cinema projects. In what way are you working on a methodology that can be used for multiple projects? Of course, video registration is one of them, but I can also think of lab annotation, like in dance and in theater is used. What kind of projects have you in mind for the future?
Yes, this is part of the work in progress of the Spectral project, because also within the project we are also all the labs are also commissioning or creating the circumstances for new work to be created. Like in our lab in Berlin, we have a residency program, and people within the residencies are creating works of expanded cinema. And a lot of the discussion within the groups running the project was, how do we create this sort of like archive for this work? How do we so it's kind of been trying to figure out, okay, how many cameras do you need to document something that's performed live, but also what do we ask the artist to provide as text documentation, score if there is such a thing, or if there is no score, how much information can they provide about the work, photographs or diagrams, drawings, paintings, whatever it is, so that this can be sort of kept. And then the bigger challenge after that is, okay, then how will that be? What kind of actual archive is there for that? What kind of database or what kind of system where these things can be accessible and exist? I don't think we're that far yet, but the idea also of this project and the things we're doing with some partner festivals, not just us, but also the other partner labs, is that each one is trying to figure out, because it doesn't really exist. That was what we saw. There is no real, I think every institution, like maybe you can talk about the eye, like you have your own way of trying to create these archives, this documentation for this type of works. And we've had access to some of it, like from MoMA, we have a sort of document that they use when they're trying to bring works like this into their collection. So that's interesting as a sort of like starting point to think, okay, we need this info, or they use this information, so we should get this information, and trying to see how we go about it. But yeah, that's kind of like the learning process of the project.
There is, of course, a lot of experience in receiving installations in museums, also in film museums. But here, of course, you have the performative aspect, which is quite different from the artist installations that we see often in the last 20, 30 years or so. In that sense, also, as we learned yesterday evening, the hardware is very critical in preserving as well. You can have a perfect documentation in your archive, but if you do not have the machines to recreate the work, then you also have a problem. And maybe a question also to Claudio, because your 8mm films, how do they survive in the future?
10 years ago, since 10 years ago, I'm trying to have the best digital transfers possible of all my films. I don't have yet the performance pieces transferred. But I thought about it a lot. But I think that without the Super 8 projectors, it is impossible to reproduce exactly the pieces. But you can have a digital reproduction of them. Even the color separation one, you can do it with 3 different projectors and with black and white transfers, and you can use optical filters. Not try to have the 3 colors in one same transfer, because it is not the same experience, because it was thought for the human eye, not for a film emulsion or a digital camera.
But the prints you used yesterday, were they the original reversal prints from the beginning, or are they duplicates?
No, it is not negative, it's reversal and are the camera originals.
Yeah, so they are the originals.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's an urgent need to make at least also analog copies from these, maybe.
Well, I have tried also 16 millimeters negatives, but Super 8 blowing up, it never is successful. I prefer the good 4-key digital transfers.
But maybe the film labor.
Yeah,
like
you
Berlin
don't have the obturation there. I know.
The film labor Berlin can maybe make 8mm copies for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you can just add that part of Spectral is also because you said the devices. I mean, they're so crucial, the equipment to have it, and we just noticed that. It's harder and harder to repair these projectors, to find good projectors, to keep them up and running, the maintenance, and the people who have the knowledge are just disappearing, or it just gets lost, or they don't work anymore in this field, and a shop closes down. So part of the Spectral project is also to recreate certain devices or to kind of modify them. And I guess we always have these big projects that we decided at Labor Berlin to recreate a 60mm projector, like based on maybe Juan can also say a little bit about that. So to kind of update it, to use a skeleton of an existing one and to kind of modify it and make it with what we kind of would need as people who still use this, like to make it more lighter, change the light, and make it to be able to use it also as an instrument to change the speed of a projector. But I mean, we're also just beginning with this project, and it's in babies, like little steps. But I mean, the devices issue is also really difficult, and as we saw, like, because usually at Labor Berlin we work with 16 and Super 8, and the piece with Valdemar was 35, and it was just also then, I guess, in the end, the lack of resources or like just support of a really experienced projectionist, and the lamp just failed last night, and we couldn't fix it. I don't know. Do you want to say about the device, or Federico, you want? No.
Yeah, I know that because these projects come from the labs network. I mean, we're part of this network of analog film labs, so it is the daily struggle of these organizations that are in these groups of people and artists that are interested in working with this type of material still today. So we bump up against these challenges all the time, which is, how do we deal with old machines that where they're not in production? How do you get replacement parts? The thing about the analog stuff is that these are, in many cases, they are mechanical machines, and they are really robust. So there is a lot of things that you can take out and add new, and you still have the thing. So you can still have a shutter, you will still have a projected analog image. So this has been kind of, but a lot of these groups, like all of us, we're like very precarious, so we don't have like the resources to kind of like say, oh yeah, we just have all this money to do it. So a project like this is kind of like, these types of projects are kind of the sort of thing to try to say, okay, what can we use to battle these issues that we have, like the equipment, how to make it better, how to modernize it, and not just get rid of it and say, okay, we switch to digital and then we just project scans of everything, but how do we stay faithful to the idea of the formats and the medium and the difference that they bring to an experience.
I just had a question for Juan and Anja related to this. My impression is that with regard to projectors, for example, worldwide, that we depend largely upon small businesses and artisans and people who are kind of have the technical know-how, who are running very small operations, and use the word precarious, right? There's a precariousness to art and a dependence on them. Is there an exception to that? My sense is that's the norm everywhere. No?
Yeah, I mean,
'Cause there's no more industry.
I mean, the only
supporting.
industry that's left is like Kodak, so they make the film.
Right.
So,
but I mean the machines.
yeah, but I mean, that's like the main thing. Like we are sort of like this weird, like, you know, you have the shark and you have those fish that go next to it and feed off it.
Yeah.
So like we are like that of Kodak. Like we just are like the little eating the leftovers. So we depend on that. So if they stop, then it's over really. Like, okay, pack it up. But in terms of equipment, I mean, there are differences. And of course, like here, for example, this is a very privileged position, like in Europe and Germany, very rich country. Like our failure was very silly because we almost, you know, we had everything access, and there is the access, like to get stuff. People have it, it's there. Like in Berlin, if you need a 16 projector, there's like a lot of places to get it. If you're in Buenos Aires or if you're in Bogota or if you're in Taiwan, you're in a whole different situation. So these differences are still there, and the thing is, as it's more about the how do you create this continuation of the knowledge. That the previous project that Labor Berlin did with other labs was called REMI, Re-Engineering the Moving Image, and a part of that was this of like, how do you create an audience that is aware of it, that knows it exists, and then perhaps wants to be involved with it and will continue it, like continue the tradition, because that's the only thing that matters. Like if nobody else is doing it, like we started doing it because we saw the work on film presented on analog, and then that was the inspiring thing, like, oh, I want to do that, so I will continue it. So that's the idea of like, if it's not possible to show these works in their format as much as one can, then nobody will ever see them, then nobody will ever want to make new stuff. So if people want to make new things, they will try to, like us, we will try to build new machines and try to keep it going as far as one can. So that's why it's kind of like the whole ecosystem needs to be supported. Like you need to have the people that are making the work and then showing the work faithfully, and then because within the structures, then there are people that will take care of like us, we have the machines, and then eventually, slowly, we try to get them fixed and usable.
Yeah, and an additional problem is that in the next 10 or 20 years, a lot of older people will retire, and a lot of knowledge will disappear as well. Yeah. Maybe this is a good moment to ask if there are questions from the audience also. In the back.
Hello. First of all, I was at the screening yesterday, the expanded that didn't work out, but I really liked the unexpanded version either, so it was still very nice evening all in all. I wanted to ask about the writings of Valdemar. I just got a little glimpse of it in the book of the festival, and I was very interested in it. First of all, I was yeah, I was wondering if it is translated or soon to be translated in English, if it is available in English, and then just about the contents, I wanted to ask, is it more on a technical level? Is it like descriptions of his technical inventions and stuff, or is it also maybe verging a little bit into a broader sense of like a film theory he maybe had in mind, like a broader film theory that is designed like for his needs or his vision? Yeah, I just wanted to ask if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you for this question. Unfortunately, as far as I know, there's no translation of Valdelomar's writings. It would be a difficult exercise because he also invented a lot of terms, sometimes combining two words, or like, for instance, the subtitle of the film is Ensayo de visión táctil del páramo del espanto, which means something like a tactile vision essay of the dread waste, something like this. So he always played also with language a lot. The same energy he had to create all these, because his work also spans, is from cinema, but also laser techniques, sound. He touched many different cultural fields, but with cinema he had a special thing. And the writings are the writings of a believer, because he was like a believer in the sense of God, in the sense of religion, but a believer of cinema. He called himself a believer of cinema. He was a believer, but not someone who would go to pray in church or something like this, you know. And this is very, like, he had a mission. He had a mission, and you can feel this in the writings. So there is sometimes there is a combination of poetry with very technical engineering type of writing, I would say. Sometimes he seems to be in a cloud, not really with his feet on the ground, if you know what I'm saying, but sometimes he was also very, very down to earth. There's many writings, and this is something I thought about before, that it would be nice to make this visible. But his writings were only available to the general public in 2010. Valdelomar was a figure that was very invisible for a long time. Only we knew about Valdelomar from a little book published by some Catalan researcher on cinema, and he did a lot of research on him, and that book was quite something. But it was in 2010 that there was a big retrospective of his work in the Reina Sofia Museum in Madrid, and the show was in different cities, but this was the pretext to publish his films also on DVD, and make a publication of two big publications, one of his writings and another one with writings by other experts, I don't know, like Thomas Baird, Nicole Brenet, people like this, writing about Valdelomar's work. But his writings, indeed, this is something that should be done, maybe not like a huge scope of his writings, but at least a selection would be very interesting. Thank you.
What if you had each person who were sitting in these seats last night writing a paragraph about what they saw, right? Which is the kind of thing sometimes you would get. Like there's a film archive, a paper archive of British experimental film in Central St. Martin's in London. And sometimes when they would do a tour, with experimental films, because it was funded by the government, they would do kind of questionnaires. So you read what people would say about the films, right? They were not good, but the responses. But there's also, I mean, the most diverse, I guess, for me, the most heterogeneous, most diverse archive would be the most useful, in one that's both very technical, which gives you everything that you could possibly see on the screen in the space, gives you all the dimensions and the specs of everything. But then there would be additionally important to be interviewing Claudio, to be talking to people who had seen the work. In a way, Claudio keeps referring to the experience of the work and what it's like to see it. And that's something that will be lost to us more and more, or be further and further in the past. I think about the expanded cinema works I've seen just in the 90s. They seem totally lost to me by now. You know, Ken Jacobs used to do the Impossible series, which was his 5 performances after Tom Tom, where he would take Tom Tom the Piper's Son, and he would just take one tableau, one scene, and just focus on that. And that would be one work. Since the 90s, he's never done them again, and they'll never be done again. I've tried to get him to, he has no score. So he would just, like a jazz musician who would be, I don't know, you know you have to play this piece, so you're going to rehearse for a few weeks beforehand. He would do that. He would rehearse the piece. It would be in his head, and then he would perform it. There's no score. That's all lost. So with this kind of experience, where Claudio's still here and he can still do it, I don't know. Ideally for me, it would be the technical documentation is really important, but if it could actually be supplemented by something that would try to capture or give a sampling of the experiences that people have of it, that would be really interesting as well.
Can I add something? Because I think what Federico said is really interesting. All the time I was thinking of something that Juan and Anja also wrote in the Unburdened Recollections text, is this character of expanded cinema that is, it has the reproductivity of it, of the image and the sound, is you can reproduce it again, but also there is this aspect that is ephemeral, right? It's only going to happen one time, or maybe you can present the performance many times, but each time is going to be different, because it's a very spatial work. In the same, it's very connected to the space, to the time of the presentation, to these circumstances that are completely ephemeral. So how do you capture this on video recording? How do you document this? It's not possible to in fact, as an artist, as an expanded cinema artist, I am also not in favor of documenting my work on video, because I don't think it captures the tensions, or sometimes it's not, the work is not just about images, it's a lot more to it. So that's why I think what Federico said about having everyone in the audience write something is quite interesting, because I remember, for instance, one historical piece, the Annabelle Nicholson's Real Time. You know this work where she is with a sewing machine, and she has the film passing through a projector and also through a sewing machine, and there's no documentation of it, just 2 images, really blurry and bad quality and really, really shitty. But someone, this is in the Lux Moving Image website, someone who was at the audience, wrote an account, really detailed, of what happened at this performance. And this is really such a valuable document of it. So it's not just audiovisual documentation, but also these accounts.
Do you want to comment on this? This let's say, contradictory idea of documenting on video the performances, and at the same time there is a great ephemeral aspect in these performances.
Yeah, I think it's like what Esperanza said. We don't deny, or at least when we thought about it, it's not that we think that the ephemerality, of course, and we practice it ourselves, is actually one of the most important aspects of it. But precisely because we know that a video documentation is such a poor reproduction of the experience of the thing, it should be more like a resource. That's the idea of, like, for us, yeah, it would be more. And there's a lot of artists that say, oh no, you can never redo this. Like, for example, if Ken Jacobs says you can't touch, this work is dead and it will never be done and it's gone, okay, that's their wish. But if something can be sort of brought back and that something can be actually seen and lived, that's more interesting, more interesting to us, in the sense, like, even if it's like completely different in a way, this sort of mutations are interesting. This sort of, it's still something that feels like living in a way, and not just sort of put away in an archive. But even for Valdelomar, like, when we were trying to figure out how to do it, and we were looking stuff up online, like text, and about trying to find information about those 2 times that the film was produced, that the expanded cinema Desbordamiento was actually shown to an audience. One of the key things was that somebody had been interviewed after the cinema about what they felt, and they spoke about how they were, like, freaked out by this performance. I don't have exactly the quote, but that was like a key, like, okay, we get now idea of some idea of the tone. Like, it was something very intense. It had like this effect. It had this kind of, like horror element to it. Like, it wasn't just sort of like a sort of entertaining kind of light show. It was more like this kind of penetrating thing that people at that time who were seeing that and were not used at all to seeing something like that were very impacted by it. So we thought, okay, we have to go in that direction, and then that was very helpful. And it was exactly that. For some reason, somebody wrote, actually it was a student thesis. Somebody wrote a student thesis about Valdelomar, did some research, and found an account of somebody that was at a screening that said, yeah, there was this crazy show thing. Yeah, that is something that's actually quite interesting to try to capture in a way, and to base this kind of work on when it's possible.
Can I ask also Federico and Esperanza the other experience, in the sense that you see now the musealization sometimes of these kind of expanded cinema projects, like you have Valdelomar also in Reina Sofia, I understand there was an installation. We have now Stan van der Beek in the MoMA as an installation. And we tend to do things like that also at Aya, I must confess. So what do you think of that? What is your opinion about these kind of museal presentations of expanded cinema?
Maybe I will answer. That's a tough one, because yeah, it's I believe museums and sorry to say this, I think normally the work tends to be distorted very often in museums, especially, as I said, in Valdelomar's retrospective. This show, I understand there is an intention to show this piece, but the way it's being shown is completely ineffectual. It's like, this is not what Valdelomar obviously wanted. If we read his writings, it's not so hard to understand. He didn't want something so flat, because in the end the work was very flat. And I believe this is a problem of expanded cinema works in general. Very often they are occurring in very underground spaces and in places that really are not the cozy corner of art, but more like hidden, or this is why also documentation, archiving, and all these logics of the art institution sometimes are slippery towards or in relation to this kind of work. That's why they are so unique, and maybe it needs to be, they need to be considered or treated in a different way, because the logic of exhibitions is a logic of a work that is just there, very safe, is gonna be there for 6 months, and nothing technical is, no technical problems are gonna happen, or is safe, is stable. But this is in contrast with the real expanded cinema, as we saw last night.
Federico?
This is my opinion.
Yeah, that's a big question you asked. I wouldn't use the word distorted because it has connotations of, being able to access all of the intentions of the artist or of an original, and in many ways, expanded cinema kind of questions the idea of an original work because it's redone so many times and it's adapted to different contexts. But yes, so when I think about these two works by Claudio, and we were talking in the past few days about where I saw them the first time. The first time I saw Horizonte was it was winter in Buenos Aires. It was an alternative gallery. It doesn't exist anymore, a very, very rough space with no heating. And he just did it. I was standing next to him when he put it on, and I thought, I think I might want to have a copy of this, so I took out my video camera and I started recording, because I didn't know whether you would, maybe the reels would break, maybe you would never do this performance again. And years later, I gave him that video. And then then when I saw Fantasmas Cromáticos, it was in Conventillo de los Artistas, which is this kind of like housing in the city center. Like you can imagine, like the center of the city, there is this housing for artists, for like poor artists. So you have like one room, and so they gave you a room that was an empty room, and that's where we saw it. It was packed full of people. There were no fire regulations being observed at the time. It was very hot. Everyone's sitting on the floor. Claudio above us, and he projected Fantasmas Cromáticos.
I have a tens of paper. I have a roll of paper with clips on 2 tripods, and that was a screen.
Right, and I was glad I was not claustrophobic, because there's no way out of that room unless everyone slowly left the room. And so can that be reproduced? No, and also for reasons that have to do with the municipal regulations and all of that. All those experiences really can't be reproduced. But, okay, and there's another element, is that there's a big difference between the relationship between art institutions that artists have and that experimental filmmakers from the 1970s have, for example, which is much more ambivalent, I think. And especially if you think about these institutions in Buenos Aires, the way they show moving images is terrible, absolutely terrible. But my big but is that it is still a necessary evil in some ways, in the sense it is a point of entry to the work, despite all of the maybe distorting, if you want to say, or kind of transformative effects of the institutionalization of these works. Once they enter into the museum as displays, still it is a way of promoting the work, of keeping it alive, of making people aware of it, and I'm in favor of that. Do I have a generally positive experience of seeing these works in museums? No, but I'm also not 19 years old walking into a museum seeing this for the first time.
Okay, I think it's time to wrap up more or less. Is there a question from the audience? Or do you have questions for each other? And have we covered all the topics that we wanted to cover? Okay, then I would like to thank you very much for this interesting talk, and hope to see you in the future for future projects as well.
Thank you.